Good evening, and welcome to the Royal Aeronautical Society. I'm delighted to welcome you to our Amy Johnson Names Lecture for 2023, entitled The Path to Innovation, a New Era in Aviation, with guest speaker Julie Garland, CEO of Avtrain, and sponsored by the University of the West of England. I'm Chris Cann, President of the Royal Aeronautical Society, and I'm so pleased to be opening this event. Every year, the Society holds a number of named lectures to honour the contribution made to aerospace, aviation and space by a chosen individual. This evening, we pay tribute to Amy Johnson. Amy Johnson is best known for being the first woman to fly solo from Britain to Australia, departing on the 5th of May in 1930 from Croydon Airport in Surrey and landing on the 24th of May in Darwin, Australia. A total of 1,100 miles. Is that correct? 1,100 miles, okay. In recognition of this, 11,000 miles, that's what I thought. 11,000 miles. In recognition of this achievement, that year she was awarded the Harmon Trophy and appointed a Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire by His Majesty King George V. However, Amy Johnson achieved much more in her lifetime. The following year, she and co-pilot Jack Humphreys became the first people to fly to Moscow in a year and continued on to Tokyo to set a further new record, this time to travel between Britain and Japan. Amy Johnson went on to achieve even more records, including a new solo record for the flight from London to Cape Town in 1932, flying across the Atlantic alongside her husband in 1933, and alongside her husband again, setting a new record time from Britain to India in the 1934 Britain to Australia McRobinson Airways. Her last major record-breaking flight was in 1936 when she recovered the record for England to South Africa. In 1940, during the Second World War, Johnson joined the Air Transport Auxiliary, the ATA, where she ferried aircraft around the country for the Royal Air Force. It was in 1941, while ferrying an airspeed Oxford for the ATA, that she died in mysterious circumstances when her plane went off course in poor weather and crashed in Herne Bay. Her body was never recovered. She is commemorated at Air Force's Memorial at Runnymede in Surrey. The Royal Aeronautical Society also commemorates her contribution with her annual name lecture, where we take the opportunity to provide a platform for women currently in industry. I also learned that in 1985, Amy Johnson became the youngest president of the Women's Engineering Society. Today, as the youngest president of the Royal Aeronautical Society, and as a woman doing something radically different in aviation and spearhead future flight innovation in a predominantly male domain, I can't help but look to Amy for inspiration. On a side note, I would love to be a fly on the wall during those meetings she chaired, and observe if she was ever asked to take notes or interrupted too many times count. But did you ever tally the number of times someone mansplained something to her that she was an expert in? Either way, I'm only joking, but if anyone comes across a journal with her tips, then please share, just asking for a friend. Today, in addition to being president, I lead innovation for the UK Future Flight Challenge. This national programme is revolutionising flight to better serve people and places, with advanced air mobility, remotely piloted and autonomous systems, and regional air mobility solutions connecting communities across urban, rural, and remote areas. It was set up to push boundaries in innovation and explore new possibilities for flight, just as Amy Johnson did. And before it was renamed the Future Flight Challenge, it was actually called the Amy Johnson Challenge. Those who developed the ambition, the vision, and the purpose for this world-leading program for future aviation looked to Amy Johnson for inspiration. Embracing this inspiration, I chose my presidential theme for my tenure to be Pioneering Future Flight Innovation, committing to using my presidency to inspire today's and tomorrow's pioneers of flight, to integrate new emerging players in future flight innovation into a wider community, and strengthening and showcasing society's relevance in this new and exciting era. So this evening, it comes full circle for me, and I'm so pleased that our speaker this evening will be covering this new era in aviation and the path to innovation. discussing RAeS, drones, and advanced air mobility, and what future holds, particularly for women in aviation. Before we get into it, I have our standard housekeeping announcements to make. So there will not be a fire alarm test in the building today. Therefore, if the alarm sounds, please exit the building. The Society's designated assembly point is a paved and railed area at the junction of Hamilton Place and Piccadilly, beyond the Intercontinental Hotel. Our staff will be on hand to guide you. If you have mobility or access issues, then please make yourself known to a member of our event staff. Leah is at the back, so that they can make any necessary arrangements for your safe exit from the building in case of an emergency. Please don't leave unmarked bags or any items unattended. Mobile phones should be switched off during our session if possible, and the event is being recorded and will be available on YouTube post-event. After the presentation, there will be an opportunity for questions, so please raise your hand if you want to ask a question, and a member of our staff, Leah, will be on hand with a microphone for that session. Right, so before introducing our speaker this evening, I would like to invite Christine and Sue to the stage. This event has been organised in collaboration with the Women in Aviation, Aerospace and Space Committee, which was established in 2009 to encourage more young women to consider aerospace, aviation and space as a worthwhile and exciting career. It also exists to provide support for women already working across all of these sectors. So please welcome to the stage Christine and Sue, who will provide an update of this committee and our mentoring platform by women, for women, ALTA, and how you can get involved.
Good evening, everybody. Carissa, thank you for that fabulous introduction, as ever. I'm sure that if Amy Johnson was still with us today, she would be so inspired and impressed to see what you're doing and what women in the industry are doing these days. And I'm so looking forward to hearing more from Julie later. So I promise I won't take too much of your time and stand too far between you and the exciting lecture that we've got to come. But as Carissa said, my name is Christine Matthews. My day job is a wing commander in the Royal Air Force. I've served for 21 years. I'm an aerosystems engineer, but I also chair the Royal Aeronautical Society's Women in Aviation, Aerospace and Space Committee. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to talk briefly about why we exist and what we do. So we, as a committee, are thinking about trying to close the gender gap that does still exist in our industry. There's been great gains, and I was talking before this lecture with some people about how far actually we've come within the Royal Air Force, certainly since the 1990s, when people were still invited to leave the Air Force when they got pregnant, and more broadly across the industry. But sadly, there is still quite a long way to go. And therefore, we want to exist as an independent source of support, information and knowledge to promote gender equality in our industry. And we want to do that by building a more gender balanced industry. We want to give women a voice across the industry, and we want to support women through their careers. And there's several ways that we do that, or three key themes indeed. So we've got targeted research and projects that the committee aims to carry out. Events and networking, this is our annual lecture, so this is our main event, but we held an event in October talking about mentoring. And networking is such an important skill, such an important asset for women to progress within the industry and to get into the industry. And Sue's going to come up and talk a little bit more about mentoring and how that fits into that. And finally, communication and outreach. We're still developing some of this work, but we've got some ambitions around ensuring that we're sharing communications from other groups that are out there. We've heard that we can listen to this lecture afterwards, so please do go and spread the word to all of the people that you work with, be that male, female, or otherwise in your industries, and let them know that the WASC is here to support them. We have a webpage that we're developing with a library of information on there. And finally, just a bit of a pitch really to get involved in the WASC. There's several ways you can do that. You could join our committee. We're open to everybody. If that's a bit too much for you, you could volunteer for a short-term role. we could see support from your company. We could take donations. We're always looking for event sponsors, so thank you to the University of West England for sponsoring this evening. And you're going to hear some more about ALTA in a minute. You could become a supporting partner for ALTA. You're already supporting us by coming to our event tonight, and there are online opportunities as well, so please do spread the word. Become an ambassador for what we're doing. And some of the communication and outreach work that we're doing, we're hoping to create some resources to help people do that. And as a neat segue into Sue's pitch, you could also, if you're female actually, it's only open to women at the minute. Is it not?
Yeah,
only women only at the minute. But if you know someone in the industry who would benefit from having mentorship from another woman in the industry, or indeed could be a mentor to other women, please do let them know about ALTA. It's a fabulous platform. And Sue's going to tell us a bit more about it now. Thank you all for coming tonight, and I hope you have a fantastic evening.
Hi, so I'm Professor Sue Derwin. My university, West of England, is sponsoring this evening. Partly because we have a very strong strand of social justice within my business school, and we believe that everybody should have an equal opportunity irrespective of their characteristic. So social justice, equality, diversity and inclusion is at the heart of what I do and the heart of my business school. So because of that, I became involved in the design launch in ALTA about 10 years ago with my friend and colleague here, Stella, and these other companies. So we got to the point where we felt, well, actually, something needs to change, not just in this industry, but across lots of industries that tend to be very male-dominated. So I had the privilege with Stella and the rest of the group to launch the ALTA mentoring platform. So you can see the companies who are involved there. And the Economic and Social Research Council, one of the under UK RI umbrella that funds academic research. And all of these companies put match funding in. So it was a really big initiative. So basically, we just launched altamentoring.com. So until now, you had to go through the society pages to get to ALTA. You can still do that. But if you want to go onto our new website, do go on and have a look. We've launched some new training modules. And basically, you can find out about ALTA. What is it? Why does it exist? You know, who was responsible for putting it all together, and where are we now? So we've got some good sponsors on board already. So we've got founding partners who are on the previous slide who actually run ALTA, but then we have donations from other companies, and we're growing all the time. So we've got about 550 individual female members at the moment, and then we look to corporate organisations in the industry to help us to develop. So we do need a bit of money to keep going. I'm not asking you for money, don't worry. So just to sort of give you a very, very brief overview of ALTA, I'm not going to talk for long, a couple more minutes. So we partnered with the industry. We won the ESRC prize for outstanding impact for business and enterprise. So this is a big initiative between industry and academia. ALTA is based on research, so we went out to ask women what they wanted from a mentoring programme, and is administered by the Royal Aeronautical Society. So the Society is a founding partner, but it also looks after ALTA and helps us to run it. The purpose is it's for women by women, so I'm sorry guys, you can't join. This is a women's space only, but it's about female empowerment, it's about development, and it's about success. So it's not about women needing help, it's about empowering women to build their own success. So it's global. It's the only global mentoring platform of its kind in the industry. So it is based on an electronic platform where people are matched with algorithms. It's about networking. It's industry-wide. It's global, and it connects women. And the resources we have it's free to register. It's free to any woman in the industry. We offer training, so we've got bespoke training packages on the website. And on the actual outer mentoring platform, you've got lots of training videos about how to actually mentor and be a mentee. So comprehensive training, even if you just joined it for the training, it's worth it. Thought leadership, and a library full of resources, podcasts, blogs, articles, anything you might be interested in. So that's all I wanted to say. Just delighted to be here this evening. Really looking forward to the keynote. And if you'd like to know more about Alta, myself and Stella are here this evening, and you'll see there are some cards dotted around, and there is a code on the back if you want to go and have a look. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you both. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for this evening, the exceptionally inspiring Julie Garland. Julie is the founder and CEO of Avtrain, one of Europe's leading drone training and consultants organizations, setting the standards for others to follow. She is a former airline training captain, aircraft maintenance engineer, barrister at law, and fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. I heard that, Graham. Prior to undertaking her position as CEO of Avtrain, she was the Director of Compliance for Norwegian Air International. She is the founding and current Vice Chair of the Unmanned Aircraft Association of Ireland and sits on the Board of Directors of the Joint European Drone Associations as the Irish representative, and is the representative at JARAS for that association, the Joint Authorities for Rulemaking on Unmanned Systems, where she's Vice Chair of the JARAS Industry Stakeholders Body Steering Committee. She's also a member of the Board of Advisors for the Estonian Aviation Academy and is a Royal Aeronautical Society mentor for aspiring aviators. She's a mentor as part of the Reaching My Potential mentoring program set up specifically for women in future flight who are predominantly from SMEs and startups. Julie has been the recipient of many awards and accolades, including being listed in the 2023 eVTOL Insights Power Book. Please welcome to the stage, Julie Garland.
Thank you so much, Carissa. And also thank you as the President of the Royal Aeronautical Society for bringing advanced air mobility and the pioneering innovation to the forefront during presidency. So we really appreciate it. Also, I just want to thank the University of West England for sponsoring the reception afterwards. We'll be having mulled wine, mince pies. And thanks in particular to Yvonne and to Christine and Leah for the invitation, for putting me forward and for organising the event. And then also, of course, the Society themselves for hosting the event and for celebrating and the ongoing celebration of Amy Johnson and aviatrix throughout history. And last of all, to all of you for attending and for taking the time out this evening for attending. So what I'm going to talk about this evening is just a little bit about Amy Johnson, maybe filling in some of the more anecdotes around Amy Johnson and some of the stuff that I was able to find out during my research. My own path, where I started from and where we are now, to a little bit about drones, Avtrain, what we do at Avtrain, and the drone industry, where it is, where it's going to, and how the drone industry is really the foundation for the advanced air mobility moving forward. And then how do we get better, how do we improve what we do? And then there's plenty of time for questions at the end, so please keep questions and happy to answer any of them at the end. So first of all, Amy Johnson. So what an inspiring female. When we consider the time when, like, Amy Johnson was born in 1903, and if we think back to that time, how few females there were involved in anything other than being home, and what she achieved during that time. So in 1929 she received her A license, and then she was the first woman in the world to receive her ground engineer's license, which was her C license, and then went on to get her B license after 50 so hours. As Carissa said, she in 1930 she was a record-breaking flight from Croydon in London to Darwin in Northern Australia. What is actually really interesting about the route is if you look at it, she pretty much took out into a straight line on a map and went, I'm going from there to there. And some of the terrain that she passed over during that period, some of the, there was no radios, there was no weather forecasting. She was heading into the unknown continuously every single day. So it makes it just so much more impressive. She just missed out on the world record during that flight, and Hinkler set the world record because of a monsoon in Myanmar. And when you think about that, like, you know, she landed in a monsoon. There was at least a significant hole in the wing, which was then repaired by people who had fabric from, old aircraft that were there from a shirt factory, I believe, and they repaired the fabric. So some really fascinating stories around that trip. And it was Golf Alpha Hotel as the aircraft. She set in 1932 as well. Again, Chris mentioned the Cape Town record. But what was really interesting, the previous record was held by Jim Mollison, who's her husband. So you can just imagine the pillow talk after that one. So I just think it's brilliant. But then, again, it's pretty sadly in 1941, she lost her life, and there's certain controversy around the circumstances that happened. She'd certainly fallen off course, and she was seen bailing out of the aircraft with a parachute. Whether or not she got caught in the propeller for the boat that was actually rescuing her, or whether or not it was actually friendly fire that actually shot down, is another theory behind what had actually happened, or whether she'd run out of fuel. So there's that. We're never going to know. But one of the other things is that there is somebody. There was supposedly a second person, and there was a second person seen, and the captain of the ship that was going to rescue her jumped in to try and rescue them, and he suffered from hypothermia and passed away a couple of days later. So there's a really tragic end to her story. But we're here to celebrate her. So this photograph, which I love, is taken on Portmarnock Beach, just down the road from Dublin Airport. It was taken in the 18th of August 1932. This was for the departure of her husband of 3 weeks, going off on a solo transatlantic flight, Jim Mollison. And Jim proposed to her 8 hours after meeting her. So that's how impressive she was. 8 hours later, he's like, "I'm going to marry you." On the left of this photograph is Lady Mary Heath, another very famous Irish aviatrix. And in 1931, Hugh Cahill established Iona National Airways at Kildonan in Dublin. And in 1933, he asked Lady Mary Heath to become an instructor. How forward-thinking was that back in 1933? Imagine hopping in and having a female instructor beside you. It's nowadays you get looks when you're the female instructor, but back in the day, 1933. So Hugh Cahill was certainly very forward-thinking. He was the grandfather of Irish aviation, for sure. Iona National Airways went on to become Iona as a training organisation, and historically has trained huge amount of the Irish pilots that are now all airlines all over the world. Lady Heath, while she was there, established the National Irish Junior Aviation Club and inspired hundreds of young aviators to get involved in the industry. And we think back again, this is in the 1930s, and the inspiration that was there. And Amy Johnson and Mollison were the original vice presidents of that club, of that that whole idea of getting young people involved in aviation at a very early age. This is where I'm going to link my very, very tenuous link back to Amy Johnson. So Hugh Cahill's, as I said, established Iona. Pierce Cahill was his son, and Pierce continued with the airline and then turned it eventually into a flying school, as I say. And then Peter Cahill was Pierce's son, and I renewed my instrument rating this summer, and my examiner was Peter Cahill. So I have this tiny little link all the way back. That's how tenuous it is, but it's a link nonetheless. So I just want to mention Michael Traynor and Petticoat Pilots. This is a really interesting. Everybody's looking for a stocking filler for Christmas. Amazing book. It goes back about and looks at female aviatrix, and it looks. Sorry, I shouldn't say female aviatrix, and he started off in the early 1900s, up to the First World War, and he catalogued the lives of 12 of these women and where they came from, what their stories are. Their history, what they faced into, in an everyday basis. A quote that he has from his own introduction is that these women made exploratory flights over long distances. They competed in air races and persevered in the face of ridicule and hostility from their male counterparts. Their determination and valour inspired me to bring their memories to life. That's from Michael Traynor, and it's a truly inspiring book. It's absolutely fantastic, and some of the stories and the quotes in it. There's letters from Amy Johnson to Irish sisters who had really got involved in aviation, and there's letters backwards and forwards that she wrote in it. So there's some really interesting reading in it and some fascinating stories, so I would highly recommend it. I'm going to talk a little just about my own path and how I've come to be involved in advanced air mobility. So my first inspiration, this is my grandfather, and that photograph that you see in the background, that is the horizon upside down, and this is him at 92 years of age. For his 90th birthday, we had bought him a trip in a Spitfire, and this is him in the Spitfire, upside down, inverted, at 92 years of age. So he was my first inspiration. He was a fleet captain on 747s with Aer Lingus. And when I was 8 years of age, he brought me into the flight simulators, the BAC 111 simulator at Dublin Airport and the Aer Lingus simulator at the time. And brought me in and sat me in the seat. And so from the day, as soon as I turned 8, that's it, I was going to be a pilot. You know, and it takes that inspiration at that young age to see it and be it. He also, he would have been flying a lot, he would have been away a lot, but he lived in the UK, he lived in Garstang. And I used to travel over and back to the UK regularly. He had a farm in the UK, and I would travel over for the summers. I was involved in horses, and I used to travel as an unaccompanied minor. And when you consider nowadays, nobody will put a child on near an airplane, or they'd be minded everywhere. Then I was like fired off to the airport with a little badge around my neck, and in the hope that I would get out the other side and I'd be fine. But we used to travel as an unaccompanied minor, and when you think back to that time, like I would have often be brought into the cockpit and into the flight deck and be allowed to sit there because I was traveling on my own as a child, and they would, so that inspiration that you get from that, from the CNB, it is a real shame nowadays that we have our locked cockpit. We're not getting that access that we would have had before. But he always believed in me, and what you can see, you can be. So I was brought up in a household where pilot was a normal thing, not necessarily a female, but certainly as a pilot. So he was definitely my first role model and mentor. This photograph is my driving force behind me, which is my dad. And this photograph is actually taken at the Titanic Museum, and I really think they thought we were prop or something on the day, because we had come across the estuary in Belfast in a rib, and we got out and we tied up the boat outside the Titanic Museum, and we had to go in with our life jackets and everything on. So I think everybody in the museum thought we were there as props. We were going to put on some kind of sideshow or something. But he, when I say he's the driving force, he literally was the driving force when I went to become an apprentice in Aer Lingus, when the advertisement had been in the newspaper for apprenticeships. My dad literally collected me and drove me to the airport to put in the application for it and said, do it. Like, you want to be a pilot, but this is your opportunity to get involved. It's our national airline, and it gives you an opportunity to get involved. There was nobody doing cadet schemes. There was nobody doing, I wasn't going to be able to afford to pay for myself to become a pilot. So he certainly was the driving force, but also he never considered there to be any limitation or any consideration the fact that you're a female. Why would it make any difference? Of course, you're going to be an engineer. Why would you even think differently to that? This photograph, I like that's really deliberately blurry. It shows how long ago it was taken. This is my apprentice class. In 1991, I started as an apprentice in Aer Lingus. And when you think back, so it is a photograph from last century, literally. But what's really wrong with the picture, and the fact is there's 2 females in this. There was 40 apprentices taken on, and there's only 2 of them are females. And even at that was a really high percentage. You have 2 females out of 40. When you look back now, less than 5% of the engineers around the world are females. Some of the challenges, I spent nearly 10 years engineering and on the hangar floor between hangar and line maintenance. And some of the challenges that you see there, particularly from older colleagues and who wouldn't necessarily have been forward thinking at the time, challenge to things like take a borescope plug out of an engine on your own. You normally have 4 guys doing that with safety harnesses on, everything else. I nearly managed to knock myself out off the top of an engine, off an engine stand. And you were really pushed to have to prove yourself far more than if your male colleagues may have to. So you didn't only have to be good at what you did, you had to be quite brilliant at what you did in order to even make a slight impression. I went flying. In 1999, I decided to go flying. I got an opportunity to go flying, I should say, as well. I was helped along the way by Hugh Flynn, who was the chair of ASL Airlines. And from when I was an apprentice, I had actually gone as line maintenance control into what was Home Cargo Airlines, became our contractors, and is now ASL Group. And Hugh had supported me. When I went to him and I said I wanted to go flying, he was hugely supportive of it and said, part of the reason that he contributed towards me going flying was that he felt that if we encourage people in aviation who he knew I was going to do well, and he said, it makes aviation better. It's not about you, and it's not about us just sponsoring you to go and do something. It's about making aviation better. You don't have to come back to us, not holding you to it, anything else. He set up now an organisation called Cargo Vision, which looks towards the improvement within the cargo industry on the basis of sustainability. So Cargo Vision is a group of companies together. Avtrain is one of those companies involved in it, but it looks mainly around drone companies, drone operators, but also sustainable fuels, hydrogen, electric-powered aircraft. and trying to really make a big change. Cargo aircraft generally are the end-of-life aircraft. They're gas guzzlers. They're the ones the highest pollutants. So to try and we can really actually turn the dial from a sustainability point of view in the cargo industry, and that's been his vision. These photographs are a combination of my passions, which are water and aeroplanes. And this is me actually arriving to RAeS Air Show. And we flew to Bray, landed on the water, drove out of the water up onto the beach, sat up on the floats for the afternoon, watching all the airplanes go by, and then drove the airplane back into the water and headed back to Weston Airport at the end of the day. What better day out can you have, like bringing your own airplane into an air show and driving up on the beach? So it's fabulous flying, and it's still, I don't fly commercially anymore, but every opportunity I get, I'll be in a float plane. So it's really fantastic. And it just shows that flying is about fun as well. And sometimes you lose sight of that when it becomes your profession and your career. You can lose sight of the fact that actually flying is really good fun. I got to fly a Spitfire from Duxford, from Weston to Duxford, and this is 161, which is the Irish Air Corps Spitfire. It was the original Irish Air Corps aircraft, but the two-seat trainer, which was sent over to Ireland in the 1950s. It had been flying at RAeS Air Show, and I was fortunate enough with John Romain to get to fly back to the UK, and he did a full display at Duxford as well on our arrival back. So it was a really exciting time, most amazing aircraft ever. So anybody who ever get an opportunity to fly in a Spitfire, grab it, take it. I went into RAeS as a first officer, and I then went on, and I was a safety officer there. I was a line training captain, and then I went into CityJet as direct entry captain. I spent 10 years flying. I was a typewriting instructor there as well. And there is no better view from the cockpit. But throughout all that time, I was still very involved in the flying school that I had been brought up in. And I stayed on there. We built out an AOC for float planes, and which was really one of the more interesting projects that I've been involved in. It's worth telling a small story around it. We had the boss, Kieran, was an air traffic controller, and we had applied to license a piece of water. Now, if you go to license anything as a licensed aerodrome, you have to have either permission or own the property. You have to have some rights over that property. So when it came to licensing a piece of water, there was a question, well, who owns a piece of water? We said, well, I do, and you do, because we're the taxpayers, and the taxpayers own the water, so therefore we are the owners of it. So why can't we license this? And we put in an application to the Aviation Authority to license a piece of water in Loughrea. And it was just passed around from one person's desk to another, going, nobody really knew what to do with it or how to resolve this. And eventually Kieran was in air traffic control in the air traffic control tower, and he walked down the stairs, and there was a map in front of him of Loughrea, and on the right beside Nuns Island, which he owned, was a little anchor. And it turned out that Nuns Island and Loughrea was the alternate to Foynes float plane base. So he phoned up the IA and he said, hey, Pierce, yeah. He said, do you know that application we made for a float plane base in Loughrea? He said, yeah. He said, we're withdrawing the application. Pierce was like, oh, you've seen sense at last, thank goodness. They're like, that's great, thanks very much. He said, no, we're inviting you to the reopening of the existing float plane base on Loughrea. So we got our float plane base eventually, and we flew, and we did a lot of pilot training at that base in Loughrea, and we opened a second base then in Lough, which was a little bit easier, having set the precedent in Loughrea. So some really interesting times. I flew some corporate aircraft in Weston, and I did my FAA ATP, flew some citations, things like that as well. And also I had a Form 4, which is the authorization as the quality manager for the maintenance organisation. We set up a Part 145 approved maintenance base for general aviation aircraft. We'd set up an AC for float planes as well, training for float planes, and we had a big flying school as well. And it's just a fascinating time, and it's amazing how you always, you hark back to where you learned to fly. Weston has now been taken over by the cousins who own Stripe, and it's really going to see the next generation of aviators come through. We go on to 2010, and my feet were definitely back on the ground in 2010. When I decided to study law and become a barrister, I had not intended not stopping flying or stopping flying commercially. It wasn't about returning from the left-hand seat or anything else, but the reality was, when you look at the lifestyle of flying and then you look at the lifestyle as a barrister, they're quite different. We get 2 months off in the summer, you get a month off at Christmas, about 3 weeks off at Easter. Full-time flying roster, very, very different. You're not really in control of your own destiny. So on the first time I think I stood up in court, my other half of the time expressed the opinion that I was being paid to argue. I wouldn't, I love it. So So I certainly enjoyed my time as a barrister. I spent 5 years at the law. I got called to the law library I got called to the bar in 2010. I spent 5 years. I did a lot of aviation law and aviation-related law. The photograph that there on the right-hand side is me with my little brother. So he is quite a bit younger than me, as you can see from this. And this just a small story about my first flight as a drone pilot. My little brother had been given a present when he was 8 of a small little helicopter drone, and he was flying around with great dexterity around the house and everything else. And he goes, "Oh, Julie, come on, you have a go." And I'm like, "Okay." So I decided to have a go, and I said, "I'll do this outside. In case I fly into something in the house or something, I'll do it outside." It was a bit of a breezy day, and I didn't realise the limitations of this very small little helicopter drone. And anyway, we went outside, and he's standing beside me, looking up at me. And the next thing I realised, I was going to fly into a house. So I decided full up, and so it went up, and the wind caught it and threw it straight into the highest tree that was going. He's looking at me there, so I'm just like, this is his Christmas present, and I've just like wrecked it. And he just looks up at me and he said, "I thought you were a pilot." Like, it was absolutely devastating. Talk about like taking the rug out from under you. But I also then, as Chris mentioned, I became the director. I spent 5 years in the law library, but really started missing aviation, and I wasn't involved as much as I wanted to be from the law point of view. And I went into Norwegian then as Director of Compliance. And this is the photograph on the left-hand side is Norwegian, the team from Norwegian when we won the Airline of the Year at the Irish Aviation Awards. So drones and Avtrain then, how does all of that bring you towards drones? So 2015, we got very much, I started getting involved in drones. The Irish Aviation Authority had approached me from the point of view, I was still involved in training, I was still involved in Weston and the training school. I was still keeping my pilot's license, and I still was instructing sometimes. And they'd approached me about looking towards the development of the rules around drones. There was the proliferation of drones starting. There wasn't necessarily the regulatory environment that we needed, and it was really about putting a professional umbrella over the drone industry and bringing that aviation experience into the industry, which was really populated by people who were generally hobby pilot or had no aviation input. So back in 2015, we set up the Unmanned Aircraft Association, and I'm delighted to have Jim Drysdale here, who's now the current chair of the UAAI. And as part of the UAI, the photo from the right is a launch of the UAI. The photograph on the left, and the reason I put this in is that beside me is our Minister for Transport, and next to him is the Director General of the Irish Aviation Authority, Avtrain at the time. And this is what's actually really important. It's industry talking to government, talking to regulators, and it's the combination of the three of those that's really critical. And this, for me, this photograph here, and I still have really good relationships with both of these, it really shows what we need in order to drive this industry forward. The part of the UAI, we were with the founding associations, JEDA, which is the Joint European Drone Associations. I love it like we're the JEDA warriors. I really love it. But JARIS is another organisation where, as part of JEDA, so JEDA is very much an association of associations looking from the grassroots point of view right the way up to lobbying within Europe. And as part of JEDA, I sit on JARIS, and JARIS is the Joint Authorities for Rulemaking on Unmanned Systems. It's a global organisation which has made up of about 70% of regulators. I think there's 66 or 67 countries represented within JARIS. We send regulators over to wherever we have our plenary and are involved in working groups. And then it's made up about 70% of regulators and about 30% from industry. And I sit as the Vice Chair of the Industry Stakeholders Body. So it's really about getting industry engaged in development of the new regulations that we will have. And I have to say the UK CAA are knocking it out of the park at the moment with their involvement in JARIS. And I think there's it's being recorded, but the political hot potato that is in the UK, I'm not really going to try and not mention the word, but it's a political hot potato to say that you're adopting a European standard. And the reality is JARIS allows the UK CAA to embrace a global standard, to put it forward as a global standard rather than just because your country cousins on both sides in Ireland and across the water are adopting this same regulatory structure. You can adopt it as a global standard rather than as a European standard. So it allows for this implement, like at the last plenary, which was in Ottawa in February, just 2 months ago. The UKCA had 11 people in attendance at it, and it really shows how involved they are from the point of view of pushing the drone regulations on. So just a little bit about Avtrain. So we became a recognised entity. As I say, I've been involved with drones since 2014, 2015. We became a recognised entity in 2019, which is an approval on the EASA regulations. We won the Air Awards in 2021 as a training certification body, and our mission at Avtrain is to encourage prolific drone operations, but keep skies safe through the highest standards of training and certification. And we live by 3 Ds. So if it's dirty, or if it's dangerous, then a drone should be doing it. We're supported by Enterprise Ireland, and Enterprise Ireland, a government agency which looks at start businesses and invests in startup businesses and looks at shareholding and allows them to develop and grow. But the support that we get from Enterprise Ireland is actually incredible, because it's not really about the pecuniary benefit or the financial benefit of getting funding from them to start off with. It's about the support we get at things like air shows. Like I've attended, as a small company, we've attended Farnborough Air Show, we've attended Dubai Air Show. We've attended Paris just recently, and we're exhibiting at those air shows in the front and centre hall at the Ireland stand. So it's really incredible to get that input and that presence. So we've had huge support. COVID certainly had an impact on the drone industry, and what it did do was there's very few positives come out of that era, but a couple of things that did happen during that time was people got used to technology being an enabler in their normal day-to-day lives. They got used to online learning and accepted online learning as being a very convenient way to learn, and also they accepted remote, so things like delivery by drone, things like this, all became something that was a day-to-day norm. Just on the Air Awards, I'm a judge now with Air Awards, and I believe the nominations have just opened, so if you do have something cool that you're doing in the aviation realm, have a look at the Air Awards website. Richard Nichols. So the past so far, so 2019 we set up, and this is, the reason I put this photograph up here is I think it shows the kind of the level of engagement that we have with industry and how we can really get things done. This is taken at Shannon Airport, this photograph, and we partnered with Shannon Airport Group, with Future Mobility Campus Ireland, and with ourselves as Avtrain. And what we did was we were working with Skyports, who were based in the UK but also have an Irish company, and Skyports were looking for their LUC. So an LUC, like an AOC Light for drones, it's a light unmanned aircraft systems operator certification, really rolls off the tongue. And so what work we did with Skyports, looking at linking critical infrastructure, and this was on behalf of FedEx. And I won't say that. It was for FedEx, and what we looked at here was the looking at the integration of drones into supply chain logistics. So how do we go about linking critical infrastructure? So this was an airport being linked to a port. We flew across beyond visual line of sight across to Foynes Port. And what's important here is this is beyond visual line of sight, fully integrated rather than segregated. So we were integrated in Class C airspace. So we were dealing with the control tower, integrating flights. We had flight plans filed for them, drone flight plans. But it was a really important step, and we're now involved in a digital sky demonstrator, which has CESAR funding, which is called ALU Air. And that again is it's ourselves, it's Collins Aerospace, Shannon Airport Group, Future Mobility Campus Ireland, AirNav Ireland as the ANSP, Mana Drone Delivery, Sprite, and Deep Blue. So it's looking at, we have a €5.5 million project building a digital sky demonstrator. So we have use space in EASA, and it's looking at the automation of airspace and the management of lower airspace and how do we go about doing that. So really exciting project. Just to talk through some of our clients, and the reason I want to talk through this is it just gives you some of the idea of some of the use cases that are going on with drones and what's actually going on in the industry right now. So Mana Drone Delivery, Mana are an incredible company. Bobby Healy, the founder, a really inspiring guy. But Mana are now actively delivering a coffee to your house in Balbriggan. You go on an app, press a button, make your order, and they deliver it outside to your door. It's lowered by a string onto the pavement outside your door. You go out, you pick it up, and you walk back into your house. It's a really incredible service. At the moment they're operating in Balbriggan. Their next is Blanchardstown, which is it's a huge suburb in Dublin, and quite close to Dublin Airport as well. So we've just been going through the airspace considerations around having a drone delivery company operating reasonably close to the airport. They're going to have 35 new locations in the next 12 months. They will have at least one location in the UK, possibly more, and they will have 10 locations around the Dublin area, and the rest of them will be across Europe, and also they're operating now at the moment in the US. We do a huge amount of work with them. Sprite is a medical delivery company where they're looking at delivery of critical medical supplies. So things like hearts and livers and kidneys and blood products, samples. You could be lying on an operating table, have a sample taken from you, it goes up onto the roof of the hospital, flown to a laboratory, laboratory and instant results before you're even sewn back up again. So there's the use case for, nobody complains about an ambulance outside or the noise of a siren outside, and they're very similar with what Spry are looking at. We're working with Amazon Prime Air, and with Amazon, it's about taking over the world. And one of the things with this is Amazon are very forthright about the cost per delivery. And they reckon that their cost per delivery at the moment, when they start off their operations, will be somewhere in the region of about $490 per delivery that they carry out by drone. That's what it's going to cost them. Now, obviously, that's not sustainable, and nobody's going to pay that to get your package delivered on as quickly as possible. But the reality is, it's all around increasing that level of market share and market capital, and bringing that down to the normal delivery price, which would be €4-5. And Mana are very much doing the same. It is about that unit economics of bringing it down. The way Mana are working towards it is looking at one-to-many. So one pilot to many drones, which they've achieved, and they have their Tail 3 LUC now. Looking at also not having anybody at the site, that is beyond visual line of sight. The delivery is carried out into an area where you're using LiDAR to scan the area to make sure there's nobody present in the area when you're delivering, rather than having physically somebody there and involving the people within the operation who are receiving the delivery. We work with the Irish Coast Guard, and this is probably one that we're really proud of because it really is the testament of drones for good. We work with the Coast Guard both on the training of their pilots, but also we do a lot of consultancy work with them around the aircraft, the implementation of aircraft, the different types of aircraft that they're going to use. Smart Dublin, we're working with, and Philip is here, so I'm working with Philip. We're developing out 4 reports for Dublin City Council around their drone strategy and their drone use, and 3 of those reports will be internal. The 4th report will be a publicly available report around how a local council goes about operating drones, both internally at council, but also how do they enable it within an environment and within a local council, within a city environment as well. We've got ASL Airlines, who I mentioned already about Hugh Flynn, but ASL earlier this year achieved their LUC, again, their Light Unmanned Aircraft Systems Operator Certificate. So this is a large global airline that has now got their drone authorization. So it just shows where the future is going, and how close that future is to us. Skyports mentioned already, we've done a lot of work with Skyports, and then I've just put RTE in there to give you an example. Like RTE is the Radio Television, which is our national broadcaster in Ireland. So this is the kind of scope and scale of, we do a huge amount then with private clients, private individuals, other government authorities as well. So there really is a vast use case for the various drones. So just looking at the industry and some of the statistics around the industry, in Ireland we've got about 17,000 A1, A3 pilot license holders. So this is the most basic qualification that you can achieve. It's about 17,000. The equivalent in the UK, there's about 500,000. With regards to operators, if we look towards the higher level of license, then towards the specific category licenses, we've got about 550 are called specific category SES pilot certificate holders. And these will be the equivalent to your GVC, your general visual line of sight certificate that you have, where we've 10,000 in the UK. So we're about 500-600 in Ireland, about 10,000 in the UK. And then from the authorizations and the more complex authorizations that we get, we've just over 100 in Ireland, and in the UK you've got about 3,500. So these are the more complex risk management, risk profiles, where you have to develop out either a predefined risk assessment where you fit into a certain criteria that's published by the authority, and you fit into that criteria, and if you do, well, you can use that risk management process. But if you don't, then you have to write what's called an operational safety case, an OSC. It's about 150 OSCs in the UK. So there's some really interesting comparisons there, where we're probably running on a per capita basis at about 50% of what's going on in the UK. So why now? There's a lot going on in the industry right now. Timing, EASA, we have a regulatory environment. It's really important that we have a regulatory environment, because a regulatory environment allows us to grow, allows us to develop the industry. In the absence of regulation, we flounder. So the regulatory environment that we have now is really positive. Again, I would say the UK CAA are doing a huge amount to develop that in the UK. A huge consultation process out at the moment, and if you are interested in the industry, you should be involved in that consultation process, because it is about the future of the industry here, particularly in the UK. I have to mention the B word. I have to mention Brexit, because Brexit has actually been, in the drone industry, has been one of the most positive things that has happened in Ireland. So sorry guys, but it's been incredible for Ireland, because before this, if you had US companies, if you had anybody else, they would come to London. And now they're looking straight to Ireland because they get into their RAeS environment, their RAeS approvals, native English speaking, we've tax advantages as well, but there really are advantages. So it has done a huge amount for boosting the industry in Ireland, drone industry in Ireland. We've a really positive regulator as well, which has, and really positive implementation of the EASA regulations, which has helped us as well. And the other thing is technological advances, but also the societal demands. We really have an on-demand culture. We want things now, we want them right away. So, that's also helped the generation. If you look at the drone delivery industry, we have Mana Drone Delivery, but we also have Wing, which is a Google Alphabet company. We have Sprite, another US company coming in as a subsidiary of Air Method. They're all coming into Ireland, they're all competing in that same space in Ireland. And then, as I said, we have Amazon now coming back in as another big player across Europe. PwC back in 2018 valued the market at 127 billion in 2030, and that's the drone market only. That's not including advanced mobility. And they looked at the services sector within that at about 13.5 billion for 2022 with rapid growth. What that means to the UK economy is about 45 billion into the UK economy, 22 billion net savings through the use of drones, about 900,000 drones estimated to be flying in the skies in 2030, with about 650,000 jobs associated with that. So it's really significant. The problems that the industry are having, and just to touch on these, so I just want to, when you think of your mobile phone generally weighs about 170 grams. Every drone that's up 250 grams or more, or if it even has a camera on it and it's less than 250 grams, there is some form of training and certification that a pilot has to undergo. The reality is most of these pilots are non-aviators, and a lot of the operators, the people who want to operate drones and fly drones, they're non-aviators attempting to comply with a really complex regulatory aviation environment. Non-standard documentation. There's very few templates out there to use. It's so difficult for operators to do this. There's continuous regulatory amendments. It's a new regulation. It's developed, and it needs to modify. And we need these regulatory amendments to make improvements to the regulation as we learn from the industry. There's a dramatic application then, a dramatic variation in the application of the regulation across different, particularly in the EASA member states. And resources aren't available in the national aviation authorities. The resources, and in some cases, not the expertise is not available there either. So it's taking a huge length of time for people to be able to get the authorizations that they require to get the operational authorization. From our own point of view, we're looking, from Avtrain's point of view, we're looking at providing a solution to this. We're fundraising at the moment to build out a platform that's going to really enable the industry to access standard regulatory compliant documentation easily. And for their initial and ongoing compliance, regulatory compliance, we will keep them regulatory compliant throughout the period of their authorization. So we have problems within the industry for sure, but we also have solutions out there, solutions available within the industry, and it is about promoting the industry and the growth of the industry. From my point of view, I'm a real believer that the drone industry is the foundation and cornerstone of the advanced air mobility industry. We have an opportunity to learn from everything that we're doing within the drone industry. And I know when I was talking to Graham earlier on, he was talking about a slide they put up with the local authority, and he's like, there's a drone and there's an eVTOL, and he said, small drone, big drone, this is what they are. There's no real differences between these, and we can use this, this period of time that we have now, this period of learning around infrastructure. Where do we land and take off from? What airspace? How do we get access to that airspace? How do we manage that airspace? When we look towards the people operating them, the licenses that they should hold, qualifications that they should have, whether or not we should keep people away from them, whether we should be able to fly over people, what circumstances, what are the technology certification processes that we have to go through. So we have this whole learning curve that we can learn from now to prepare ourselves for the advanced air mobility market. I'm going to talk through a couple of slides here. I'm not going to talk through in detail. These are available. Anybody who wants these slides afterwards, you're more welcome to them. And I just want to give credit here to SMG Consulting and to Sergio. This is what's called the Advanced Air Mobility Reality Index. And this is updated about 4 times a year. And it's an incredible piece of information if you're interested in advanced air mobility and the players within the advanced air mobility market, where they're going, where the movements are, who got investment, who needs more investment, who's going to pass, who's going to fail, who's going to move on. Recently, there was some real significant changes in the shuffling around of who is at the top. When you look across the top line, what they look at is down the left-hand side is the list of companies that are really involved in this industry, in the eVTOL industry. Let's call it so: E for electric generally, and VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing. Advanced Air Mobility, AAM, and we also now have Innovative Mobility. We have so many different acronyms and so many different titles for this. I think Advanced Air Mobility we're settling on to a degree, which includes drones and eVTOLs, and is an umbrella term for everything that's coming into the future. But when we look here, what they look at is what Sergio takes into account is funding. He looks at the use cases around, compares the different use cases. He looks at the type of vehicles, so some of them are hybrid, some of them are electrically powered, some of them are vectored thrust, some are multi-rotors, and then what method of propulsion, how are they being powered. Also then at the types of operations that they're planning on carrying out, and whether or not they're fully autonomous, whether they're going to be piloted, whether they'll have a pilot on board or not, and then when their first flight and their entry into service is going to look. So a big changes that came about in November. This list really got shaken up in November, but there was 3 areas where they added additional metrics to. So the first one, and the funding. And they looked at milestones, taking into account the differences in funding needed to scale up to actual production. So a lot of these are just operating at the moment, say with prototype aircraft. But if they actually to put that into production, what kind of money are they going to need in order to do that, and where is funding? So they're really looking much more in depth into the funding each of the companies has received. The other one is technology readiness, and it's really a difference between when you look at the flight certification programs that a lot of these eVTOL OEMs are going through is, are they flying subscale models, or are they flying subscale or full-scale actual prototypes? And the third one then was production readiness, and that's really looking at the granularity between the low-rate initial production and mass scale. So, a lot of these companies, you find that they've partnered somewhere along the way, or they're subsidiaries of car companies. And this is where you really start getting into that mass manufacturing. How do we go about doing that? I've been fortunate enough to be working with Beta Technologies, and I was revisiting Beta, and I got to be there 3 days before their brand new production facility opened. And it's an incredible building, absolutely incredible. And they will, in that one building in Vermont, they'll be able to roll one aircraft off the line every day. So they'll be producing 365 aircraft. But for the scale of what we need to do, that's actually a tiny amount, because from the point of view of the scale and the size and the mean that this industry can grow to. So this is, as I say, this is the Advanced Air Mobility. It is available online. A couple of interesting points around it. All of these graphs are available, and you can go into Sergio's website, and it's SMG Consulting. Now, from the funding point of view, when you look at Joby Aviation is the only one that's received more than $1 billion in funding. Pardon, to look and Lily as well. So the two of them have got just over $1 billion. But when you look at what the estimate is, realistic estimate to take this from somebody drawing on the back of a box to actually bringing it out into full scale production, the estimate for that is about $2 billion. So when you look at the funding that these companies have received versus the level of funding that they will require in order to get to mass production through certification into mass production, it has a really sobering effect when you look at the level of funding that will be required. Entry into service. The interesting part of the entry into service is the shifting, is the light blue lines. So how much did people predict? When did they predict they were going to enter into service? And what are they predicting now? You'll see EHang is at the top there, and they had planned on 2022. They're now looking, they received a certificate, but the certificate that they received has very, very significant limitations on it. So, it'll be interesting to see how that goes on. And some really interesting, Volocopter have the 2024. I know Philip again wrote about this recently with the Volocopter in the Paris. They're looking at 2024 they really got some terrible kickback from the council about the city doesn't support it. It's a rich person's vehicle. It's all of these different things. It's the first time in the industry you're really getting that naysayer, and sometimes I think we live in a little bit of a bubble ourselves that we think everybody knows. But if you walk outside on the street now and ask somebody what advanced air mobility is, or what an eVTOL is, or what an air taxi is, they're not going to know. So we educate ourselves and we keep informed about what's going on. But sometimes when we approach, particularly around cities and city environments, where's it going to go? So this is just the entry into service. It's just an interesting. The other one that's included now and has only been in for about the last 6 months is the Advanced Air Mobility infrastructure. So this is looking at vertiport companies, vertistops. How do we develop the infrastructure around the industry and enable to support the industry? that's all I'm going to cover on the advanced air mobility. As I say, the slides are available and you're more than welcome to go through them and have a look on a really in-depth and granular basis. What I want to talk about really is how do we get better, how do we improve the industry that we're in. So Angus back in 2019 ran a poll, and they have fully funded pilot programme. So no barriers to entry, it's fully funded, and 7% of the applicants were female. And it's just astounding that would be the rate. And this is in 2019, so this is where we have schools, we have people, there's role models out there, everything else. So how do we improve that figure? Not for me was the reason, the top reason given. But the other ones was not believing that they had the necessary skills, and that was about 4%. Now, considering you're going into a pilot training program where you're going to be trained from zero to hero, not believing that you have the necessary skill set at the outset, it's terrible. But they also brought the in-school or college. It wasn't brought to their attention as a possible career. And I can absolutely vouch for this. When I was in school, I said I was going to be a pilot. I was going to be a pilot since the time I was 8 years old. So I'm in secondary school and I went to my careers guidance and I'm like, I'm going to be a pilot. And they go, well, you can't, you're a girl. And I'm in an all-girls school. I'm doing physics, I'm doing advanced applied maths. I'm doing all of these subjects. And these subjects are all catered for in this all-girls school. And yet the career guidance is saying, well, you can't become a pilot because you're a girl. I did prove them wrong anyway, but this is about getting back into schools and really at very young ages getting into schools, and if you see it, you can be it. So it's back to my own grandfather showing me and demonstrating to me. This is an interesting, and I give credit this to John Drysdale as well, when he had given me these two excerpts from his own when he was doing his thesis on gender diversification in aviation. And the one on the left is from the Irish Air Corps recruitment back in 1936. And at the time they were looking for 50 men and 40 boys. It's just incredible, when you consider that Lady Mary Heath at this stage had been a flight instructor for Iona for 3 years at this stage, where there was 50 men and 40 boys looked to be taken in. And I actually, when this came up, I was speaking to the Defence Forces on International Women's Day, and I brought these articles up, and John had uncovered them. So how far have we come? I mean, in 2016, 3% were female pilots. It got to about 4.7% in 2022. It's gone up to about 5.1% now, but really that's due to really dramatic rise in India. India has really pushed forward on attracting females into the industry and making it accessible, and about 12%, just over 12% of all of the pilots in India are female. So that has driven the global average. I would say the positives that we're facing into from the point of view of the drone, the advanced air mobility, and trying to attract new talent into the industry is, with 50% of, that are particularly untapped at the moment in our female population. But the idea is that training we're going to go through for both drones and for advanced air mobility is a lower cost, it's less incentive training. We have these levels of automation. So are we even actually are they going to be pilots? Are they going to be systems operators? What are these new people who are going to be operating these aircraft in the future going to be? But it does open it up to a career that may not otherwise be accessible to anybody, to the masses. It's geographically contained networks. So what I mean by this is you can guarantee that if you go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning and you're due to finish at 4, that you will be finished at 4, because you're not going to be outside the country or in a dramatically different. The advanced air mobility market is going to be short-range flights, and even if you ended up stuck in an outstation, it's probably only going to be 20 minutes away. That's the reality of it. And then upgrading. Then we look at upgrading. If you come in as a drone pilot now, do you get an opportunity to move on into the advanced air mobility market into the future and fly eVTOL? And then the reality is as we get through full autonomy, is that pilots will be able to work from home. So it's our ambition. So how do we go about bringing this change? And I think it's make an impression early. We need to get into schools, but we need to get into primary schools, not secondary schools, not when people have already made subject choices and what they're going to do. It has to be a primary school level to demonstrate that to young children about what they can do, about what the aviation industry, and getting to career guidance teachers as well and saying this is what you should be encouraging in your students, and also expanding about what the actual aviation industry is, and the skill sets that are needed within the aviation industry. When we go back to that 40% of females figured they did have the skill sets. Well, what skill sets do you need as somebody who's going to go into a fully funded pilot training course? Some hand-eye coordination, great. But I mean, you're going to be taught everything. And if your subject choices have been right on the way through, and you have those. And also, it's not just about becoming a pilot. It's about engineers, which, dreadfully short in the whole industry. We're going to be catastrophically short of aircraft maintenance engineers. And air traffic controllers as well. We're moving towards automation within air traffic control as well. But we're a long, long way away from it. Role models, male and female, put down the ladders, help people, boost them. And you can see there, I had my mentor, my grandfather, then my father, and also Hugh Flynn. They were tremendous people within my life who supported me throughout my life. But having female mentors is really important when you're in the industry. I walked into so many rooms where it's a sea of black suits and you're the only female in the whole room, and it's a networking event, and it's an old boys club, and people are chatting to each other and not necessarily led into the group. Now I've become much more comfortable now with kind of walking up and going, "Hi, I'm Julie. We do drone training," and in fairness, that's a pretty good opening line. You kind of catch people's interest, and once you do that. But it's a hard thing to do, so you need to support, and that takes male colleagues and female colleagues. It's not about just having female, but it's about, opening that up and putting the ladder down for everybody. Identify and break down the barriers. So actually identify what is preventing people from coming into the industry, what are preventing people from figuring this being their career, and break down those barriers then. Quantify and measure, set targets and a solid plan to achieve them. So we need to measure where we are. And I gave you some statistics there about the industry and how metrics are moving in the industry. We are measuring it, but we're not making a plan as to where we're going to get to and how we're going to get to it. So, like saying that we talk about gender quotas, and I'm not a fan of gender quotas at all. I believe in gender targets. But only gender targets with an absolutely solid plan to get there. And the only way to get there is to encourage people at the application phase. We can't have a gender quota of saying we're going to have half of the pilots in the next Air List recruitment phase are going to be females if only 7% of the applicants are female. It doesn't work. So we need to set these targets. We need to set the targets around on the application rates and actually really boosting that application rate. And that will automatically feed through to on the other side. And then measure again. There's no point in just measuring and then patting ourselves on the back when we get this tiny little shift and moving the dial very slightly. We need to measure again, and we need to review why are we not being successful. Is there other things that we can be doing? And then build your tribe. I'm really fortunate. I've 2 tribes. I have my original aircraft maintenance engineer class, and they are my absolute tribe. We get together once every year. Still, we have WhatsApp groups that sometimes are terrible, but most of the time it's actually really fun. And it is about building a tribe. But also in 2019, when I set up Avtrain, I received what's called competitive start funding from Enterprise Ireland, and that was actually an all-female cohort that came in at that group, and they were trying to promote female entrepreneurship. And the whole idea of that is that is really my tribe now, and it's incredible the support that we get from that network. So it is about supporting each other. Find your tribe, but your tribe can be male, can be female, and then supporting networks to educate. And there's a couple that I just want to call out, because there's a few that are really, there's some resources out there that we're not tapping into, or maybe we're not maybe aware of. So one of them that I would say, and Joe is here in the room, Joe Moses runs a formidable Females in Future Flight podcast, and it's incredible, and there's some really inspirational characters on there, so have a listen to that. Philip is here, Philip Butterworth Hayes, and he runs Unmanned Airspace, and just there's 3 websites, and the information that's on there and the articles that he produces are just second to none. Really informative about the industry and really on top of exactly what's going on within the industry. eVTOL Insights, Jason Pritchard does podcasts, articles, and a WhatsApp group as well, where you can really keep informed. So every day you're getting a new article through, and you have time on your commute or whatever else to flick through and find out what's going on in the industry. Jarlath Regan, an Irish comedian, did a podcast as well called The Flying Irishman, which is some really interesting characters on that as well, including myself, Jack Ryan, Alan Joyce from Qantas, Willie Walsh is on it. So there's some really interesting and then, as I mentioned already, SMG Consulting, Sergio's website, really interesting about keeping on top of the metrics around what's going on in the industry, the movers and shakers. Airwards, I mentioned as well, they've just opened, Richard Nichols, they've just opened their Airwards platform again. And then the likes of what Sue is doing as well with the Alta mentoring. I think Helen is here. My Minty, I think, is here somewhere in the room. So getting involved in programs like the Alta mentoring system, it's really fantastic, and it's really about supporting each other. And then, of course, even the Royal Aeronautical Society as well, and the YouTube channels, and all of the information that's there and that's available in the industry. So With that, I just had one last, I didn't want to put the Irish Air Corps putting up there 50 men and 40 boys and not give them a compliment at the end of it. So in 2022, this was their statement now on equality and what it means. So they say equality does not mean women and men becoming the same, but women and men's rights, responsibilities and opportunities will not depend on whether they are male or female. I really think that's a really positive message to finish on. So with that, I'm over to questions. So hopefully I haven't run too much over time or kept everybody too long, so hopefully it's pretty much time. So thanks everybody.
Thank you, Julie. So questions. So if you raise your hand and say who you are, we've got some roving mics. Okay, in front.
Hello, my name's Lewis from the ATI. Just go back to the index slide, please. Just wanted to know what that second column was, the arrows.
Oh, it's moving up or down?
Yes, please.
Whether they've moved up or down. So right. It's whether or not their place has increased or decreased or stayed the same.
Choice of microphone. Hello. Was that working? Hello, Julie. Thank you very much for the presentation. My name is David. I'm from the Argenti Group. We're an investor in aerospace and innovation. I have a.
We're open for business.
Super. I have a niece who is extremely. I'm a pilot as well, by the way. So I have a niece who's extremely interested in aviation because we get to go flying. And her favourite book this year, actually, bear in mind she's very young, is a book by Michelle Curran of the Air Force Thunderbirds called Upside Down Dreams. Michelle was Upside Down 5. So that primary school thing I completely get, and it's a fantastic book for the book list as well. I was talking to her about a career in aviation and how I think it's she's terribly interested, very excited, and she literally just asked me what kind of a future does this industry have, and the only story I could come up with was I've just bought an iPhone 15 and drones are on version 3 and 4. So just imagine in her language, Gen Alpha coming through, there's a lot to go. What do you think the next big steps in RPAS and UAS, UAV are going to be? Because we've got so many issues to address in the ecosystem. It's not just about the drone and the pilot. There's conspicuity, there's communications. What do you think the next issues are going to be for the future of the industry?
Yeah, I think there's a few areas where we're going to, I wouldn't say stall, but I think that we really need to pay attention to. And one of them actually today, I was with Angaka today, and one of them is around cybersecurity and detecting what we're doing and what we're operating from ill intent. So I think that's a huge area. I think airspace is their biggest concern at the moment, and the automation of that, because we have to start thinking in a totally different way about this. We have to start thinking about that it's a machine speaking to a machine, and you shouldn't have necessarily human interaction because they should be able to interact with each other. The technology is there, it's available, and we also have to start trusting technology a little bit more. I think we've got an inherent distrust, and we look at AI and what's going on with AI. We just had the AI Act across Europe now about protecting people who are producing AI to make sure that it doesn't overtake everything else we're doing. So I think the positive use of AI is going to be hugely beneficial in this industry. I go back and joke about pilots working from home, but that is the reality of it, is what are we going to have, and we need rethink around the systems operators that we're going to have and the levels of autonomy that we're going to have in this industry. But also, we have to have that human interaction with this industry as well. So there's going to be, from a public perception point of view and from a regulator point of view, we're not taking pilots out of airplanes anytime soon. We will see, I think, air taxis that are fully autonomous. But on a really large scale, and certainly coming outside here to pick you up and bring you home tonight, we're really, 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 really far away from that. So I think that some of the enablers is, it's really good when you see this and you see suddenly we've got the instructor being included in this as part of it. It's such a critical part of it, and we haven't, this is an expert in the industry who only, 6 or 8 months ago started including a slide on infrastructure in the metrics and the statistics they're working on. So it's this holistic approach. And the other thing I would say about this industry is we've gone beyond proof concept. We've proven the concept. Let's move on to actual commercial operations to try and start making some money out of the business. Because there's so many people who are involved in the business right now, and we're probably still, realistically, somewhere between 3 and 5 years away from really actively, commercialization of the industry. When you look at Amazon and their estimate of 490 to deliver a package, that's, you can't have unit metrics like that. So it's about moving that dial forward to commercialization of the industry, and I think that's going to be really hard, but it's also, it's the critical next step. To do that, though, we need all of the other issues ironed out, and we need everybody to be pulling together. The project that we have in Shannon is a really good example of that, because it is about all of the pieces of the jigsaw in one place fitting together and actually probably meshing together, and seeing then how do we scale that out into a large operation. It's not proof of concept. We're putting it in, building it as a future existing. It will remain in place after the period of the project. It's not a proof of concept, and I think that's what we need to move away from. The best thing is moving away from proof of concept towards actual realistic commercialization of what we're doing. And I'd be happy to talk to your niece anytime, so please. My email address is on the end there, and hook up on LinkedIn as well. I'd be more than happy to have a chat, because it is important that my contact details are there. Absolutely. Deal. Conscious I'm between mulled wine and mince pies and that.
Very quickly, just looking at your list of companies, there's a proliferation of new companies in that space who haven't certified their vehicles before. Do you think that the aviation authorities are resourced enough to be able to handle that volume?
No, not even.
Is there a choke point already?
It's an absolute choke point already, like an absolute choke point. I go back even on the slide I have about the problem in the industry. There's under-resourcing within the National Aviation Authority, and also then that knowledge base. Like, this is new technology. So, and we're using technology that, necessarily hasn't necessarily been used, like electric aviation, electric motors, certifying electric motors for aircraft. We have been certifying this equipment. So the level of knowledge within regulators, the resources within the regulators, and the chokehold that is already in regulator now by the drone industry remind what's coming, like barreling down from the advanced air mobility and the certification standards. And even in the drone industry, and we're moving up under the SOAR risk assessment, we have SAE levels, specific assurance and integrity levels. So in the specific category, which is in the medium category of risk, before we get into the certified realm, we have 6 levels. But in the level 5 and level 6, it requires a certificate of airworthiness. So even in that lower risk for unmanned aircraft, we still require a certificate of airworthiness, and there's nobody there who has that knowledge to say, this is a drone that we can give a certificate to. Some of them will go, okay, this is a drone that we can find in a remote area, and as long as you keep it in that environment, you'll be fine. But as soon as we want to start operating it in different environments, which are higher risk, then we immediately run into log jams, and you're 6 to 12 months to get an authorization for what actually can be a relatively simple operation. So how long is it going to take to get for a complex? So absolutely, we're completely under-resourced in the NAs. Under-resourced, and there's going to be a knowledge gap there as well.
Thank you, Julie. So we'll wrap up this evening with that question. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
For that. Thank you.
Thank you.
What an incredibly informative, insightful, and inspiring lecture. And now we're all thinking about seaplanes.
Absolutely, I know, yeah. Come here to talk about eVTOLs and then with seaplanes. Yeah.
And I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening for this lecture, and I want to thank the University of the West of England for sponsoring. So now you're all invited upstairs on the first floor of Mr. Argyll room. We'll be using for a drinks reception, which will go on until 8:45. Yeah, so please join us upstairs for some mulled wine and mince pies. Thank you.
Thanks.